We are going to talk about the expansion of the modular ecosystem and how that is enabled by tools like Hyperlane. And then we're going to talk about the two most recent additions to the Hyperlane suite and things that, as a developer using Hyperlane, you'll have access to, titled Connecting the Modular Expansion. So let's think about, like, why is everyone here today in general? We're here because presumably we have some affinity for, like, these internet computers, these blockchains. We think they're very, very cool. We've been using them. As we use them, we stress their limits. If you think about, like, this gathering in particular, you, me, everyone here, we're spending a lot of our life energy to increase the demand for these internet computers, for these blockchains. But so far, every time we do that and we're successful at this endeavor, we run into, like, a fairly predictable problem, right? These are machines that kind of by definition make digital resources scarce for the first time. And as we all work to increase the demand for them, we run into the same predictable wall, right? The most vivid experience that someone will have due to us increasing this demand is that they become basically unusable. They become too expensive, too slow, too congested to use. And so in a weird way, we have our entire endeavor, our entire effort to increase demand ends up being self-defeating. So what do we do about this? There are two general paths so far. There's one that says, hey, let's create bigger, faster, more performant computers. And then there's another school of thought that we've been calling the modular ecosystem of late, which says, let's just make more computers. I would say that after recent events in the last couple of months, even the more performant school of thought is now realizing that there is some benefit to distributing the load with a larger number of computers. And now you're seeing the talk of some chains like Solana maybe embracing layer 2s of their own, or side chains or something of that sort. And so in my case, we've been focusing on the other school of thought, the modular school of thought. And again, we have this thought about increasing the number of computers. And this really was spearheaded first by the folks at Cosmos, more recently by the folks at Celestia. I'm here to tell you that basically, if the launch of Celestia in Q4 last year was kind of the big bang moment for the modular universe, we're now in this expansion phase where what is happening is that the cost of creating your own chain, the cost of creating another rollup, both in dollar terms but also in terms of effort, is being vastly reduced. You could, while you're sitting here, go on something like Conduit or Caldera, and you can have a rollup live within a number of minutes. And so this is a required step towards this modular expansion, to be able to create a chain more easily and thus have more computers to service this increase in demand. But what good is it if the computer that you've created can't connect to any of the other ones? I would argue not very useful. And certainly most builders in the space feel this. And we talk to rollup builders all the time, and once they figured out, how do I make my rollup, the next question up was, how do I get people into it? How do I get assets into it? How do I connect with every other part of the crypto ecosystem? And therein lies something like Hyperlane. This is why we made it. This is why we made it in this way. So again, normally I spend more time to talk about this concept of the modular expansion, but I'm not going to do that today in the interest of time. But my point is here, when people talk about the modular ecosystem in general, they focus really on 4 layers of the blockchain stack, which are execution, settlement, consensus, and data availability. And they're trying to tell you, like, hey, this allows us to separate those. Now it becomes much more, if I'm going to launch a chain, instead of doing all 4 layers of the stack, let me just focus on a few of them, inherit things like data availability, like settlement from other chains, say Celestia, say Ethereum, EigenDA, Avail. But if the entire purpose of this exercise is to allow us to create chains more easily, I think there's a 5th layer of the stack, one that completes it, that usually is exempt from this discussion for whatever reason. And that is interoperability. Again, if it becomes easier and easier and easier and lower cost, lower effort to launch your own chain, there's going to be an insurmountable number of them. And then I need a way to connect between them. I need both as the builder of the next chain. I want to be able to connect my chain with others. And as a, as a user, as a citizen of this, continent and expanding, universe of chains, I need to be able to connect to them more easily. And so it's not even just that interoperability is missing from this discussion. It's specifically a permissionless variant of interoperability, one that can be easily added and supported on any one of these new chains. And so that's where something like Hyperlane comes in. Right? I would argue that you can't have a discussion about modular blockchains, about all these rollups, without some concept of permissionless interoperability. If I can self-serve myself a new chain, well, I better be able to do that with the connective layer to the other chains. Otherwise, I've just now created the equivalent of a new island in the ocean that has no connectivity to the mainland. But the creator of that new chain, you'd very well want people to be able to arrive there. You want them to be able to bring their goods. And I've always enjoyed the analogy of like blockchains as cities or population centers. Well, if you're building a new city, you better make it accessible for people. You better give them a reason to come and move there and bring their commerce and bring their culture and bring all of those things. And so today, you can do that, but it's generally gated. It's generally the case that if you wanted to get access to some form of interoperability to connect your new chain with others, you need to go and persuade someone. You need to go have a conversation with another team that has built one of these interoperability protocols and get them to come and service you. Sometimes that involves payment, sometimes not. Sometimes that involves a lot of convincing, sometimes not. Sometimes it involves a governance vote, sometimes not. Either way, it's not your choice alone. And that doesn't feel like something that's very crypto. It certainly doesn't feel permissionless if I have to persuade someone else. And so based on this, based on the pace of this modular expansion, kind of the destination that we're all headed to, I would say without a doubt, you got to have some variant of permissionless interoperability. And that would be something like Hyperlane. So a brief on kind of how it works. There's really three moving parts to a Hyperlane integration. First, we have the mailbox. Think of this as like the on-chain API that you as a developer interface with. Second, there is, here it's listed as validators and interchain security module. Really what an interchain security module is just some wrapper on logic that for anything that provides either a state attestation or a state proof. Because what does it mean really to connect two chains? It just means that chain B needs to know something about chain A and vice versa. So we need some way to attest to the state there or to prove it. And so modular is so flexible that, again, anything that provides this, this form of either state attestation or state proof can be morphed into a Hyperlane module. So this could be as simple as some validator system that's just looking at the state and saying, hey, I saw this, this looks good. Or it could be as complex as the latest and greatest ZK magic. So like most recently, Succinct's most recent innovation has been implemented as a Hyperlane module. And the coolest thing about it, again, because of the open framework nature of Hyperlane, anyone can produce these modules. And in fact, more of the recent ones have been created by external contributors, either the teams themselves that are behind the security innovation itself, or just random people on the internet who are like, hey, I want to use this thing. I see how to do it. This looks cool. I'm just going to go ahead and do it. So if the first piece is the mailbox, this set of contracts, this on-chain API. The second is the security module. Third is the relayer. This is a term that gets used in a lot of systems and doesn't always mean the same thing. In the case of Hyperlane, it's basically just like a delivery vehicle for all intents and purposes. It observes the mailbox on the chains that you want to connect, sees that something's coming through, checks to see if some module has signed off on it, could be any form of module, and if everything matches up and the user is paying a fee, it makes the delivery, sends it off to the destination. At that point, we have like a final logic check against the security module, And that is where you can also insert some additional bespoke logic as the developer that's guiding the integration. Because the thing that we do in crypto all the time that I don't think makes very much sense is we treat every interaction and we treat every transaction exactly the same. Hey, you're sending $2 to your grandma? Cool. We're going to use the same process as if you were sending $200 million in the most high-stakes transaction you can imagine. That seems kind of strange, right? Like when I go to my bank, they don't treat me that way. There's one thing that banks do that's somewhat sensible is this. You know, if I want to get 50 bucks out, they don't even have me talk to anyone. I can just go to the ATM. If I wanted to get, say, 4 or 5 figures, let me go to a teller, and they're going to ask some questions. They're going to ask, hey, what's the last 4 transactions on your account? What's the address? Do you have any other people on the account? And interrogate you for a little bit. And if you ever try to empty your account and close it, you're not leaving the same day, right? You're not getting that done the same day. They're going to have a much different security protocol. So what are they doing? They are changing the security measures based on the stakes of the action. We never do this in crypto. Why not? Like, why should we treat everything the same, right? Like most apps can probably reason about the types of transactions their users are doing. And so at this last check with the security module, that's somewhere where you can say, hey, wait a second. This person is just transferring $20. All right, that's pretty low stakes. Maybe we send this through the fastest option. Oh, wait, this transaction is trying to drain this entire liquidity pool. Maybe it should go to the slow module. Maybe, like, does anybody need $300 million in the next 10 minutes? Nothing, you know, probably not. Like they can probably wait until tomorrow or the next week or in a few hours, whatever it is. And so this is some of the additional logic that you get to benefit from if you're leveraging Hyperlane. So we can go over this a little bit more, but as I mentioned before, they can take any shape or form. Anything that provides a state attestation or a state proof can be leveraged here. And so now that we covered like kind of how does it work, I want to spend the rest of the time telling you about the 2 latest additions to the Hyperlane suite. So up until this point, there was no module that was live with Hyperlane that introduced the concept of economic security. You know, it's kind of a big term, but really all it means is like, hey, if someone's lying, if someone's committing some type of fraud, they're going to lose money. They have to put money on the line, and now we associate a direct cost to bad behavior. The AVS that we are launching in the next 2 weeks with EigenLayer will be the first, but not the last, instantiation of economic security through Hyperlane. So what this will allow developers who are leveraging Hyperlane, either for their chain or for an app, is to know that, okay, it's not just that I'm getting this attestation, it's not just that I get to use the system. In the event that something were to go wrong, someone's on the hook for it. And before some very knowledgeable people will say something like, well, EigenLayer doesn't have slashing yet. Yes, you're right, it doesn't. It will soon, we hope, but a fast follow to the Hyperlane AVS will be a broader form of economic security that is more Hyperlane specific, and that will have slashing live on day 1. That's something that you should be expecting to arrive, call it like end of Q3, early Q4. But the most important concept here is that now, again, you don't have to trust the good nature or the business motivations of the validators behind a given module. It's, you know, they're going to lose money outright. It's not something that you have to project, oh, they'll lose money because their business reputation will be damaged. Well, no, they'll lose money exactly according to the defined rule set that anyone can examine, check, and feel more comfortable with. So again, this module should be out in the next 2 to 3 weeks. That's step 1. Step 2, a broader economic security module for Hyperlane that, again, any developer can leverage anywhere. The other thing that Hyperlane does that just recently got addition is, well, why did, you know, we talked before about what a new chain builder needs. They want to connect their new chain with others. They want to be able to bring assets, bring commerce. How do you do that? You need some form of bridging. So until today, we had this concept of warp routes. What a warp route is just like our take on the concept of bridging. And whereas generally speaking, bridging kind of follow this omnibus approach of all the assets from all the people go into one place and then represent an increasingly enticing honeypot for somebody. And they're also secured in exactly the same way, regardless of the asset, regardless of what you're trying to do with it. Warp routes do things a little bit different. Each asset goes into its own contract and can have different rule sets because they can use different security modules. So if you're using this as a chain builder, hey, you know what? Maybe I want a different rule set for my gas token than I want for, say, stablecoins coming in. And maybe I want to have an even different rule set for other assets that aren't stable, say, right, just random ERC20s that someone wants to bring in. So by separating this, can be a slightly more cumbersome because it's just always easier to do everything in a one-size-fits-all kind of way, but there are drawbacks to that. And now that allows you to have a little bit more distinction, a little bit more control. Once a warp route is created, you can actually create the token that gets minted can be set in such a way where it can kind of freely traverse between any chains that the deployer configures it to. So no longer do you need to do any other type of lock and minting. It can just freely transfer between the configured chains. And those configurations can be upgraded and changed upon time based on your preference as the deployer. But this is all well and good. But one thing that we saw with bridging in the last 6 months that was pretty beneficial for those who first introduced it to the market was this concept of yield-bearing bridges, first introduced by Blast and later by Manta. If you think about these two chains, they had this kind of was like their cool little trick to get a lot of growth. Right? Both Blast and Manta soared through the ranks of different L2s, and the fact that they could offer yield to their depositors was a big part of that. Their pitch to people wasn't just like, hey, come to our chain, and now you get to experience all the cool thing that this chain has to offer, all the new apps. It was also, hey, while you're doing this, while your car is parked in this new city, you're also earning money. But it's not magic, right? We know how they did this. We know how to do this. So why should they only get it? So not anymore. Yield routes. Everybody gets them. Now, anyone can deploy a yield route to use through Hyperlane. And a yield route, same concept as a warp route, just now that the asset has been deposited from that origin chain, the owner gets to decide which yield vault. And any 4626 vault is supported. All those assets get deposited by your users, and now you can say, well, I'd like them to go into this Maker vault, into this Aave vault. I'd like them to go into this thing. And now you, like Blast, like Manta, have this feature. And what I'll say is, at a matter of course, so we've built Hyperlane as the open framework for interoperability, and the thing that we want to be doing every single time is take the things that have been out of reach, inaccessible to most users, and make them available for everyone in an increasingly easy and simplistic way. Day one, they won't always be the most easy and simplistic, but over time, they all get easier and easier. So first, that started with the concept of interoperability in general, right? Up until a few months ago, you had to speak to another team. They had to lead the integration for you. Not anymore, right? If you follow the Celestia ecosystem, you may have seen a launch of a chain called Forma, which is kind of like the main NFT issuer for the Celestia ecosystem. Forma is running Hyperlane on their own and using TIA, the bridged asset, as their gas token. And not only that, they're getting it from Stride, another chain that is running Hyperlane on its own. These are two chains that are using Hyperlane completely by themselves, on their own terms. All the fees that are associated with the act of bridging are collected by those chain teams, and again, not sacrificed to a third party. And so now, once again, we've done that with the concept of yield routes. Oh, sorry, I should have probably gone here first. So what can you do with this? Well, what we've seen people use it for so far is to either distribute that yield directly to token holders and just tell them, hey, now you've earned it, it's yours. Others are using it to help pay for their operations and just create more incentive mechanisms on their chains. And others are using it to simply just subsidize the gas. So they're planning to not charge any gas fees on their chain and cover it on behalf of their users. What makes them feel comfortable with the ability to do that is, well, we know that we can earn anywhere between 3 and 10% on the deposits that we get. We're just going to use that to offset the cost. Anything that's left over, terrific, extra revenue. And so those are the main things I want to talk to you about today. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Our docs are over there at docs.hyperlane. You can join our Discord. We should update this. We just switched our Twitter handle to remove that underscore XYZ. But we're based here in New York, down in Soho on the intersection of Broadway and Houston. Feel free to come by. Lots of people come and work out of our office, especially if you're like active in the modular system. Feel free. It's an open invite. It's my company. I'm happy to do it. So no one should give you any trouble. And just remember, if you're looking for some form of interoperability and you care about sovereignty, you care about being able to control it, Hyperlane, the open framework for interoperability, is probably your best bet. So thanks for hearing me out.